Hello, hello, and welcome back to the third class of our CRQ. Now, we're going to start going into my materials. Yeah, and we've got a lot of great stuff going on, you know. In times of turmoil is when we have great diplomatic moments. Sad to say that, isn't it? We have to have conflict. We have to have war. We have to have anger and hostility and turmoil and chaos and mayhem. Lots of great adjectives and nouns. Just to have good diplomatic moments. It's good for poetry as well, by the way. But anyway, the thing is, what we have is a lively moment in the world. We had a moment of peace and tranquility and I don't know what we call it, a organized world, multilateral, peaceful moment in the world during the Obama regime. Before that, we had the whole American economic crisis, 2008. Then Obama came in, things seemed to calm down. Now we've got Trump, now we've got Bolsonaro, now we've got Le Pen, now we've got all kinds of wild leaders, Putin, Xi Jinping. We've got a lot of authoritarian influence happening in the world. We have a lot of isolationism happening in the world, a lot of anti-multilateralism happening in the world. And so it's creating a lot of space for great articles. So are you reading The Economist? Are you reading Foreign Affairs? Are you reading The Diplomat, The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., etc., etc.? Because there's a lot of good stuff out there. Now, I made the list of topics that I wanted to go over this semester. I do reserve a little bit of leeway, not a lot. I will try to maintain the topics as close as possible. But what I will try to do is to bring topics that I feel are relevant to the moment. So, if we're talking about the environment, I may have been thinking about Syria, but when we get there, now we've got Brumadinho, that kind of thing, So if something happens along the way, I won't change the overall topic, but what I will do is to adapt the articles and the ideas of what are happening now to that moment. That's my objective. Takes a lot of work on my part, but in the end, it's very fulfilling for me and very productive for you, I guarantee, okay? And of course, throughout this course, we will be looking at the different styles at all times. We'll be looking at the directly stated, the inference, the vocabulary, the grammar questions, and really analyzing what's happening in the world and how can I apply that to the TPS. Okay, so our first topic, let's jump right to our slides here. This one, yeah. Go to our slides. We've got this wonderful background now. I like this new style of PowerPoints that they've given me here, this template. China and world influence. And now I know that on the internet I had put China and the internet. And it's partially the internet, but when I started looking, I thought, if I only talk about the internet, I limit a little bit. And in fact, next class, we're going to talk about China and international economy. So I'm looking at the internet, but in such a way that how is China trying to dominate the world, especially China and Russia? And that third text in this set, how China and Russia want to undermine democracy, right? The first one about sharp power, the second one about their workings to undermine. So I felt that it was more about world influence than it was just about the internet, okay? There is an article, and in fact it's one that I'm doing in the CRE, I didn't include here, I might include it in a future moment, called When China Rules the Internet. It's a beautiful article from Foreign Affairs, came out last year sometime, I don't remember exactly, probably middle of 2018, but it was just an article that shocked me, and it's really well written about how China wants to become the new cyber superpower and how it's taking over the role of the United States in the internet. And the whole idea of authoritarianism, domination, control, things like this, right? That's in my CRE course. If you're taking the CRE course, you'll get that. I think I'll probably take a piece of it in a future moment. Probably I'm thinking about in the postmodernism one, if not somewhere else. But it is a great article to read, okay? Just wanted to throw that into you. Now, so our main topic today is China and world influence. As I told you before, I'm kind of saying a lot of things today that will become very repetitious over time. But what I will do is a variety of different amounts of texts. Sometimes I'll give you 3 texts, 4 texts, 5 texts. Sometimes I'll give you 1, and we'll work heavily on that 1 text, okay? So it depends on the week. I'm not worried about emulating exactly the 2018 examination, saying you must have 6 texts, you must have this amount per text. No, that's interesting that we saw that in the first class, but what's interesting is knowing how to deal with a text. And sometimes one text has more questions in it than I don't even need to bring in other texts. You know what I'm saying? I need to work with the vocabulary, I need to work with the grammar, I need to work with the comprehension of the text because this text is very rich, right? Even in this one, you'll see that the first 2 texts that I have here, I divided. It's actually 1 text. I forget the name of the text. I have my computer open here just for references. Forget Hearts and Minds by Christopher Walker and Jessica Ludwig, who are the founding father and mother, let's say. I would like to say fathers because it's a woman and a man. But the founding father and mother of sharp power, right? And so the first part is like their background philosophy of sharp power. But the second part is more about world influence and not so much about internet. And that's where I got the idea that, you know, I'm not just talking about the internet. We need to talk also about how China is influencing the world and how they're trying to undermine democracy, how they're trying to gain economic dominance, how they're trying to gain military dominance in the region, etc. You know what I'm saying? And so China is a very important topic now. It was on the last examination, China and panda bear diplomacy, right? So I think the more we read about China, the United States, you know, and people ask me this, they say, Todd, so if you watch the CACD, Priscilla asked me, how is the exam going to change with this new president and this new Minister of Foreign Affairs? Are they going to eliminate things? And I said, I doubt it. They have to deal with the same problems, right? All of their ideology is going to be kind of thrown out the window, in my opinion, when they have to deal directly with the economic situation. When they have to deal with China, who's one of the great importers of Brazilian commodities, how are you going to say we don't want to deal with China because we love America? It's not going to happen unless you want to kill the Brazilian economy. So, you know, what I'm thinking is we don't have to eliminate topics. We need to still deal with these ideological topics, even Marxism and leftist ideologies, to understand the anti-movement. Because we have to understand the movement to understand the anti-movement. You can't just talk about anti-this. Like, you know, one time I was in college. I don't mean to get off the topic too much here. I'll get to the questions in a second. But one time I was in college, and a guy was in a classroom, and we were talking about Graciliano Ramos. Okay, it was a Brazilian literature classroom. And the guy starts going off about how he's a Marxist, Leninist, and blah, 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 blah. But saying this had really nothing to do with Marxist, Leninist thought, you know, just that typical American propaganda. And he was an ex-major from the military, so you can imagine. And the teacher was beautiful. The teacher turned to him and said, have you ever read the Communist Manifesto? Have you ever read Das Kapital? You know, and I go, no, but shut up, man. You don't know what you're talking about. So why do I tell you that story? Because sometimes people get very anti-philosophy, but they don't know the philosophy. They just know what the media is telling them. So again, we need to understand the philosophy and understand the anti or counter philosophy so that we can be ready for either side when it comes on the examination. That's my role, is to bring you everything, a grab bag of information. And then you get on the examination and you go, this exam is easy. Todd's crazy. That's what I want to hear, okay? All right, enough on babble. Now we want to get into the questions here. Let's get right to it. So the first one here about forget hearts and minds. We start off with a directly stated question. How do I know that? Looking at the question, it says, determine if the following statements are true or false. Gives me no information about what the question is about. So let's take a quick look at the verbs in the main questions. We see seek to undermine. We see is portrayed as. We see are overspending. We see seeks to boost. All of these are affirmative verbs. And they are not asking for insinuation. Therefore, we have a directly stated information, and we must be able to find this information in the text in order to validate it. Right? Remember that? Okay, so we look at number 1. Russian high officials seek to undermine democracy in order to lure the Western world towards the enticements of authoritarianism. Now, this is the first concept of sharp power, which is sharp power is not meant to attract other populations to its philosophy, but rather to undermine the other population's philosophy so that they question their own and then be looking for other. And then when they start looking for the other, then they will inevitably search for a more authoritarian regime. That's the basic underlying philosophy, at least when they blame China and Russia, okay? So when we come back here, the lure, the attraction, to attract the Western world toward the enticement. So lure, enticement is basically the same thing. But what it says here, Russian authorities, meanwhile, are less inclined to convince the world that Russia's system is appealing in its own right. Rather, they have attempted to make democracy look relatively less attractive through an attack on the integrity of democracies and the ideas underlying democratic systems. So once again, we have the attack on democratic systems, but not necessarily appealing. It says to convince, meanwhile, are less inclined to convince the world that Russia's system is appealing. So if you didn't see the less in that sentence, you get mixed up, okay? So the key is they are not inclined to attract. Therefore, lure and enticements are incorrect. Get my point? All right. Number 2, according to this journalistic text. According to tends to be a directly stated information. We've already checked that it is portrayed, which is a direct affirmative verb. Therefore, we know it's directly stated. We must find the information in the text. Sharp power is portrayed as being the likes of soft power. Being the likes of. Being the likes of means similar to, right? Seems like. All right, so is it similar to? No, in this text it very specifically says it isn't hard power, military force not really in play. It isn't soft power, although some scholars and journalists frame it as such. So according to this journalistic text, now that's important because look, let me come back here again. I want you to pay attention. In the answer it says, although, second line, although some scholars and journalists frame it as such. So if I had said in journalism, it would actually be true. Right? Because some journalists think it's that way. However, it says in this journalistic text, which means I'm not referring to any text. I'm referring only to this text. You see what I'm saying? So that's why the according to is so important, because although the philosophy may be different outside of the text, inside of this text, what he's defending is X, Y, or Z. You know, it doesn't matter what anybody said. It matters what the text says. You see what I'm saying? That's the most important point. So when we come back here, is portrayed as being the likes of soft power. It is not really soft power, therefore it is false. Okay, so just be true to the original text. Number 3, the text insinuates that Russia and China are overspending governmental funds on both soft and sharp powers in order to influence the far reaches of Europe. So, insinuates. Now, we have a bit of an inference question here because we have an insinuation. So, we have to determine this part about Russia and China are overspending governmental funds. Can that be understood from the original text? When we look at the original text, it says, of course, a reader may counter that Russia and China are bent on exerting soft power. It is just that their investments in it have failed. So what it does not say in here is it doesn't say that they've spent too much on, which is something we're going to talk about. Well, it's actually in the CRE, but prefixes and suffixes are so important. Overspend doesn't mean waste in a sense of not using properly. It means you spending too much money on something, okay? So if they're overspending governmental funds on both soft and sharp powers, then that means they're spending too much. Here it says they've simply failed. They had their investments, but they failed. Yet it would be strange for decision makers in Moscow, Beijing, and elsewhere to waste increasingly large sums of money year after year without ever considering correcting course. So he's saying, how can we accuse them of simply being wasting money without trying to correct their course, without trying to change their path? it's not logical that they would be wasting money like this. So it's not saying that they are overspending. It's saying that they failed in their spending. So what they're investing is not a question of quantity. It's a question of what they invested in did not work. You see what I'm saying? That's why this question is false. Okay, so it's the difference between quantity and quality. And in the text, they're defending quality. In my answer, I'm defending quantity. Okay, get the idea? All right. So that one is false. I won't read the whole text. I do like to put larger pieces of text here for you to have a reference in the text. Okay. Moving on. According to the text, sharp power seeks to boost governmental power and thwart free will and free thought through censorship so as to destabilize sovereign institutions. This is a glorified vocabulary question, all right, because you needed to know specific words in my answer and identify those words inside or concepts inside of the text to be able to make sense of it. So I gave you this big, large paragraph because it's pieces of the paragraph. So when we talk about boost governmental power, we talk about privilege state power, state governmental, privilege boost, give them more power, right? Thwart free will and free thought. It says privilege state power over individual liberty and fundamentally hostile to open debate and independent thought. So open debate, you have individual liberty, open debate, free will. Okay, so free thought, independent thought. So what we have is basically just the same idea said in different words. And then we have through censorship, which is the idea of not allowing thought to be divulged, publicized. Okay? And then destabilize sovereign institutions, degrade the integrity of independent institutions. So destabilize, degrade, sovereign integrity, institutions. So we have, yes, this is true. Just a lot of little pieces. What I want you to pay attention here is that I didn't take one sentence and rewrite that sentence. I took pieces of many sentences in the paragraph, put them all together. Then you just have to find all those pieces and make sure all those pieces correct according to the original text and does it make sense according to the context. And it does, so therefore this one is true. Right? So there's your first question. All right, moving on to question number 2. We have a pure vocabulary question here. According to the context of the above text. Now, why do I say that? Because many times people say, oh, but there's a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh definition here that don't meet this context. Great, doesn't matter. All I need is that one definition from this context. What I hope you will get out of this course over the next some odd weeks, 30 some odd weeks, is that you don't need to know every word in English. What you do need to know is how to deal with words in English. So you get a paragraph of some kind, you need to be able to figure out how to deal with that information inside of the paragraph. So my objective with you, whether you're taking the CRE and the CRQ or just the CRQ, either way, is that you boost your vocabulary knowledge and grammar structural knowledge so that when a word comes into the middle of the text and you didn't know it, you're able to make sense of it from the greater context. That's the key. All right? That's the key to text comprehension. It's not knowing every word and every concept, but knowing the majority of the text so that any little word or concept that is not so logical or immediate to your knowledge, then you'll be able to make sense of it from the context. Right? So since this one says, according to the context of the above statement, determine if the following statements are true or false. Okay? So therefore we have, co-opt could be replaced by sway. This one is very tricky here because if you look in the original text, you have China and Russia have tried to manipulate and co-opt. So if co-opt were to sway, then co-opt would be the same thing as manipulate. Right? And why would we have two? He'd be repeating himself. So manipulate, influence, co-opt, trying to show what we want you to do. Okay? Not to pull, but rather to, as they say, to designate or to appoint. Okay? So what I want you to understand, the difference here is that when you sway, it's like manipulate. To sway is to influence, to impact, to change someone's mind. And to co-opt is to designate, to appoint, to invite, okay, to show information so that the person will be influenced, okay? So co-opt is different than manipulate, and therefore it's different than sway. Is not really in play, plays no key role, all right? If it's in play, it plays a role, right? And so if it's not in play, then it does not play a role, right? And so when you say no plays no key role, in this context, not in play means it's not so important. So not playing a key role is not so important. Therefore, this is true. A joint project and a joint venture, although they're very similar, you have to be careful of the difference between research and business. When you're in the university, you might have a joint project with two universities where both are doing research on a similar subject for you to publish some sort of a work, right? In a joint venture, the objective is two companies who join together for one business reason for a short period of time under contract to produce a product or service and to logically gain profit in some way, okay? So the key of the joint project here, the joint venture doesn't work inside of this because it's a sense of study. It's not a sense of business and profit, okay? So that's why joint venture is incorrect in this context. Win over and dissuade. Actually, dissuade is the opposite of persuade, because win over means to persuade, to convince you, whereas dissuade means to unconvince you or to make you not believe. Okay, so it's actually the opposite of win over. So therefore, that one is false. Number 3, we have more wonderful vocabulary in context. You're going to notice, especially in these first few, let me come to me. These first few sets that you're going to do, you're going to have a lot of dictionary work. You probably already noticed that, right? I give text with a lot of high-level vocabulary, and you will start seeing this vocabulary repeat over time. Boost and bolster and infringe and invest and etc. All of these things will come over and over again. Those are the ones you should pay attention to. Let me tell you one quick little story about my philosophy of learning vocabulary. It's a 5-step rule. Have I told you this before? If I have, sorry, I'll repeat it anyway. I have no idea. There's the second step, which is, gee, I've seen this somewhere before, and I still have no idea. The third is, gee, I've seen this somewhere before, and I think maybe. The fourth is, gee, I think I know what this means. And the fifth is, I know what this means. Right? Even in linguistics, believe it or not, with my little sarcastic rendition, in linguistics they actually have a study that shows that people need to have seen a word like 5 times for them to put it into their long-term memory and for it to leave their passive comprehension and enter their active comprehension, okay? Which means understanding versus creation. Okay? So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is my objective with you is you're going to see a lot of words in the beginning you've never seen before. Right? Natural. Absolutely normal. But over time, these words will start to repeat on purpose. I know what I'm doing. Okay? I do repeat words on purpose because I want you to see them in different contexts. Sometimes it'll be true here, false there, right? Because they do that from time to time on the TPS. Extol is the one word I've seen come up 2 or 3 times on the examination now. Okay? So, I want you to understand a lot of words so that when you come to a text that you don't know a word, you'll be able to make sense of it, okay? But it takes a lot of work in the beginning, a lot more time. You're going to find that things will start becoming more logical as you move along throughout this course, okay? Fair enough. All right, so the first group is infringements and encroachments. Yes, these mean the same. I just want to look at the context here. I like to read the term in context. Where is the word? Infringement. There it is. Authoritarian regimes have also applied sharp power to pressure universities in establishing democracies with potentially measurable infringements on academic freedom. So we're talking about restrictions, right? We're talking about invasions, breaches, violations, transgressions, taking away. And therefore, the word encroachments upon, infringement upon, mean the same thing in this context, okay? It's interesting to note that we're moving into this third question, and we're moving into technically the second text of the mock exam, but it's the second text of the same text. You know why I divided that? Because I could have just put all the questions at the bottom, but I felt that that text was actually 2 texts. The first half was about sharp power and soft power and hard power. The second half was about China and Russia's influence in the world, which didn't really have a direct relationship with sharp power as much as it did with reactions to how other universities are acting when they begin to denounce the authoritarian regimes of Russia and China. And Saudi Arabia, I think they also mention in here, right? And so it's interesting how they kind of move away from the idea of just internet and into the idea of conflict, diplomatic conflict. So even though it's the same text, I decided to do two separate sections because one seemed more internet-based and the other one seemed more diplomatically based, okay? So even though they're from the same text, they seemed like two different texts. So anyway, just thought I'd make that commentary. Embedded and rooted, they both have the idea of underlying ideas, cultural centers embedded in the universities. So they're things that have been there for a long period of time, something that is the oldest part of a tree is the root. The most important part of the tree is the root. So if it's rooted in, then it means it's been there for a long time, okay? So this is true. Sanitized and germ-infested. Sanitized actually germ-free. Germ-free. Germ-infested means has a lot of germs. So actually, germ-infested is the exact opposite of sanitized. Okay? So if you see germ-free, it would be okay in a metaphorical sense, but germ-infested is exactly the opposite. Sanitized here, meaning a sanitized Communist Party version, which means that it's very clean, everything's perfect, everything's wonderful, right? The Confucius Institute presents China as being a perfect society, whereas the Canadian universities were playing it or portraying it as an evil or an authoritarian regime, a repressive regime, okay? Letter D, abrupt and lackluster are exact opposites. Abrupt means very fast, hasty. Lackluster, very slow, lethargic would be the right word, okay? So therefore, they're opposites. And, oh, right, I even almost caught myself there. I was looking, they are opposites. Why did I put true? Because it says, is used in this context as the semantic opposite of lackluster, right? Be careful, because the first one says same contextual use as, so it has the same meaning. Second one says same semantic use, same meaning. Same semantic meaning, same meaning. As semantic opposite of. They did this on the examination about a year or two ago. I think it was 2017, and I got tricked because I didn't pay attention to the word opposite. And I was thinking, this is not the same as that. So I put false. But it's true because it's actually the opposite, right? I was thinking it's the same meaning. It's not. But, okay, so is it the same semantic meaning or is it an opposite? Pay attention to the wording because that's something, if you're not paying attention, and the other three are about same meaning and the fourth one's about the opposite. Sometimes you get pulled into the fourth one as being the same meaning and you end up answering the question wrong, not because you don't know the words, but because you didn't answer the right question. Okay, that's how they trick you on the CRQ. Or, CRQ is my class. That's how they trick you on the TPS, all right? All right, moving along. Number 4. Grammar question. You see here, determine if the following statements regarding the grammar uses of the following terms are correct or incorrect. Grammar uses. So in the very command of this question, you already know that the focus is on grammar and not on vocabulary or directly stated or inference. Okay? But we do need to understand the concepts of each. So in each one of these, what's the logic? In letter A, in paragraph 2, the use of which could be replaced by that without changing the semantic or grammatical usage. Well, the problem is, and this is a common grammatical thing to pay attention to in relative clauses. When the sentence, let me say that in a different way. In the middle of the sentence, you have a comma followed by a relative. You may never use that, okay? So you can only use that if it's a pronoun, that school, that house, right? When you're making a commentary to the previous point, as we see here, which says China's Confucius Institutes, which are educational and cultural centers, okay? So you're just making a commentary. You're describing the institute. What kind of institute, okay? That case, since the Confucius institute is a proper name, it must be followed by a comma. It's extra information. And all extra information or non-defining clauses must use which and not that. That can only be used in defining clauses. Okay, makes sense? So it's a technicality of the language here. So which cannot be replaced by that because of the comma, because it's a non-defining clause, and that cannot be used in a non-defining clause. Letter B, in paragraph 4, the use of given could be replaced by since without changing semantic or grammatical structure. No as well, because since actually means given that. Because with since, you have to have a subject and verb. Since this happened, something else happened. Given that this happened, something else happened. If you had given that, it would be okay. But when you just have the word given, this structure, then you have the sense of regarding, considering, taking into account, okay? And that's not the same as since. It's a grammatical error, all right? So therefore, given cannot be replaced by since in this sentence. In paragraph 4, the use of among could be replaced by amongst without changing the semantic or grammatical structure of the sentence. And I'll leave the slide up here because I wrote it in here, true. This is only an American versus British word form question, but both are correct and in meaning and in grammar. So here's the deal. When you come to me and you begin to study with me in the second phase preparation with the mock exams and stuff, I'll start saying choose a side, British or American. It doesn't mean that British or American is wrong. They're both correct, but you shouldn't mix them in your writing. You should choose one side or the other and be consistent. That's a question of consistency. That they will test you in the writing section. But when it comes to grammatically correct or not, among and amongst, amid and amidst are basically the same. Except that among and amid, the only slight difference would be that among is in a physical group and amid more in an abstract idea. But that's, a technicality. But when we just put on the ST, what do we have? The American form is among. The British form and a more archaic form is amongst. Therefore, it's the same thing. It's just written in a different form. Okay? Just thought I'd make that commentary so that you don't get tripped up. Just because it's American versus British, if it's grammatically correct and semantically correct, it doesn't matter which form it's in. Okay? And the last one, the use of whose could be replaced by which without... Oh, that's weird. That's a typo there. I don't know why I did that. Without changing the semantic or whatever structure. Okay. I'll save that at the end here. Don't know what I did there. Some weird little punch to the keyboard here. Sorry about that. But whose and which. Whose is a personal pronoun. Okay. Possessive, excuse me, not personal. Possessive pronoun. So it must come before a person. Which is not possessive, and it refers to a thing. It's not a person. Okay? So when we have the possessive pronoun before a person or a person, then you have to use whose. If it were before a thing, you would use... Can I say that? Yeah, I was just thinking, I think what I was about to say is not going to make sense. So let me change that strategy. Which is more of a relative pronoun describing the noun before it. Whose is a possessive pronoun describing the noun after it, not before. You see what I'm saying? So it represents the person. Let's come to the text here. It says, who researched China and whose careers. So these people are, the Chinese government exerts pressure on individual scholars. So we're actually referring to the scholars here. Okay? Who researched China and whose careers. These research scholars' career. So what it is just a pronoun substitution of scholars in the possessive form. So therefore, whose is the possessive form of the relative pronoun. Okay? Which is not a possessive form. That's the bottom line. That's what you need to know. Okay? So which can never substitute whose in any given sentence. Make sense? Okay. Moving on. Determine if the following statements can be inferred. I even underlined and highlighted that. Inferred from the above text. So now we're not worrying about is it exactly in the text, but can it be understood from the text? Can it be comprehended from the text? So in the first one, due to China's feud, I highlighted the word feud. I want to see what definition I get over here. I think dispute's probably the best definition. I'll just check my synonyms dictionary here just to make sure. Whoops, where am I? Feud. Feud. What a great word. Dispute, number one. All right. Dispute, argument, quarrel, grudge, disagreement, hostility, vendetta, strife, row, warfare, battle, bad blood, opposite of friendship. Where am I getting all those words? I'm not the most brilliant person in the world. I'm using this. It's called a computer. You know what I'm saying? And something I can show you very quickly here, just for you to do something on your own, is you highlight the word and you put here dictionary of synonyms, dicionário de sinônimos, and you'll get a number of synonyms. Now you have to be careful, there's a number of categories. Make sure the category fits the context. But that, when you're doing studies, and even when you're doing courses for me, it's okay because I want you to learn more and more vocabulary. It's a way for you to beef up your language. And you'll notice here, I was right with the first guess, dispute. I came here, dispute, number one. Great, it's run. But there are like 10 different words, and that can help you in your vocabulary banks, okay? So that when you are actually producing how to memorize all of this vocabulary, you can use the dicionário de sinônimos, the synonyms dictionary, to your benefit, okay? So a feud is a dispute. So if it's a dispute with the Dalai Lama, Chinese students are being barred from receiving grants. They are being prohibited from, they're not being allowed access to. So it says in 2017, the China Scholarship Council, a branch of China's Ministry of Education, stopped accepting applications for scholarships from Chinese graduate students and scholars wanting to study at the University of California, San Diego. So since they stopped, we know they've been barred. And then at the end it says, after the Dalai Lama gave the school's commencement, right? So we can infer that there's a feud between China and the Dalai Lama. We know this pretty much from history, so it's not something questionable. But you need to understand, okay, so what are they saying? They're insinuating, they're inferring. They don't say directly China has a feud with Dalai Lama. But we know it's true because if they didn't have a feud, why would they be barring students from going to this university? Okay? So you just need to know the definition of feud, see if that can be understood from the text. It can be understood, therefore it is true. Number two, China represents a unique reactionary diplomatic move to punish U.S. universities who speak out against breaches of human rights abroad. Now, one, unique. The word unique means one of a kind, doesn't have another one like it. In the same text, we actually have Saudi Arabia. So it can't be unique if it's happening in other countries. It's already wrong right there, okay? Punish U.S. universities. Not really, although the result of it is to punish, right? Not the intention. They're actually not allowing their students to go because they don't want the students to learn from that university. But the result is a punishment of the university. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I put that in green. It's like it's questionable. But breaches of human rights is not about China. It's actually about Saudi Arabia. Okay? Canadian Foreign Ministry about the repression of human rights activists in Saudi Arabia, not in China. So therefore, the unique and breaches of human rights are not referent to China, and therefore it's false. The Confucius Institutes play a role of Chinese sharp power influence within U.S. universities. Well, it says China's Confucius Institutes, which are educational and cultural centers embedded in more than 525 university campuses around the world and are considered by Beijing as vehicles for propaganda and influence, right? Present, sanitized, blah, 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 all right? Now, what can we understand from this? If you only look at the word sanitized, it seems like, oh, but they're presenting a very beautiful image of, right? But they do present an opposite image of what the actual universities present. So I would claim, yes, it is a form of sharp power, not to attract to China, but rather to undermine what they're teaching in the democratic nation. You see what I'm saying? It's a bit of a stretch. I recognize that. It's a bit of a stretch, but that's my philosophy. Because sharp power is to undermine, right, the beliefs of the democratic nation. So if I come with my Confucius Institute and I show you the opposite of what they're teaching at the university, I'm undermining. I'm not just saying, come to China, we're amazing, this touristic thing. But rather showing something that China has a sanitized Communist Party approved version of Chinese politics, particularly influential where host universities lack resources, whatever. So they are undermining the actual system itself. Therefore, that's why it should be sharp power. Oh, now I see. I marked it false. Whoops. Okay, I may have to rethink that one. Now I'm defending true, and then I put false. Interesting. I'm going to have to rethink that one. Now that I just sat here and said everything, this one's questionable. This one's questionable. It's interesting how we make questions, and then when we go to defend it, we realize, there is a certain amount of sharp power inside of it, although the sharp power is usually like very aggressive. But in this case, it's a form of undermining of the university. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to rethink this one, and you can consider it as annulled for now. Okay, because I think both sides are true, false and true. I made it false because what I was thinking originally, now that I'm thinking about it, is that they just are propaganda and influence, not necessarily undermining the democracy, right? But that propaganda and influence also undermines the philosophy of the university, right? So there's questionable points there. So I would probably overthrow this one and annul it for the fact that both sides could possibly be defended. Okay, interesting. It just came to my mind right now. But so we'll call this one. I'll put here in parentheses. Happens from time to time. I'll put here annulled due to ambiguity. Fair enough. Okay, so we'll leave that one as that. Annulled due to ambiguity. Okay, so I meant it to be true. But as I was speaking to myself and to the camera, I started to realize, there's a way to overthrow this one, okay? All right, moving on. Number 5. Oops, let me come back to my full screen here. I'm almost running out of time. Where's my full screen? It went away. There it is. Full screen. Okay, almost running out of time here. 42 minutes. Wow, I'm only on question 5, but that's all right. Won't rush through. We'll just talk about what we have here. Censorship and self-censorship have had relatively undeterminable impacts on the published works of China and their distribution. Given the nature of censorship and self-censorship, now we do have the same words from the text. It's not common for me to repeat the same words, but it was very difficult to find anything else that was as representative of these two terms. Have had relatively undeterminable impacts. It has been difficult to measure the degree to which intimidation from authoritarian governments has already made academic institutions, publishers, and individual scholars shy away from writing about. So we don't really know exactly how much censorship and self-censorship have impacted the publication of works about China. Okay? We know that there has been some sort of impact, but in this article they say it's very difficult to measure the degree to which intimidation, blah, blah. Okay, so they don't have an absolute here, therefore this is correct. Question 6, we get to the next text where we're now talking about China and Russia wanting to undermine the Western world and Western philosophy, how Russia and China undermine democracy. A lot of good vocabulary inside of here. Let's take a quick look at the logic here. The reason why I just put this on one slide, if you come to the answer key, you'll see that I put the whole paragraph underneath. And all of it is simply, my text is just really hard to read here. Okay, the text is in green, and in parentheses you have the number and the letter highlighted in yellow, so you have the direct answer to each one of these, okay? So Globosec's main objective to exploit the flaws of foreign leaders in order to boost the allure of the Kremlin and other illiberal regimes. Actually, it's a lot of repetition of terms, but it actually changes the idea. When you look in the text, it says, which has been the prime target for Moscow, reports such as Slovakia-based Globosec, blah, 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 blah. Moving on. Go beyond measuring the popularity of foreign countries and leaders to register how populations feel about the issues that the Kremlin and other illiberal regimes seek to exploit. Right? It's not the objective to exploit the flaws of. It just is showing the popularity and how they seek to exploit. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, there's a lot of repetition of vocabulary in this statement that is not the same as the original first sentence of that paragraph. Okay? Globosec promotes issue-based surveys to illustrate Moscow's influence on public opinion regarding key international subject matter. I believe, this is a time reference because here I've put Globosec promotes, when actually in the text it says, letter B, they might be used in, do I have the right number here? They might be used. They might be used in conjunction with issue-based surveys to show instances. So actually they're saying a possibility in the future. What we're saying here is promotes issue-based surveys. It's already happening. So in my answer here, I'm saying it already exists. In the text, it's saying it's a possibility to exist in the future. So therefore, the verb tense is incorrect in this sentence. Global SEC reports have demonstrated that people of Central and Eastern Europe do not claim themselves to be either purely Western or Eastern. This is true because they talk about their identity lies somewhere between West and East. So they're not able to identify themselves as purely Western or purely Eastern. And the last one, when referring to a gray zone of vulnerability, I gave you this very specific reference in the paragraph. The author wishes to exemplify how Russia can take advantage of this ambiguity of identity, that idea of not purely Eastern or Western, to fuel conflict, to worsen the conflict between Eastern Europe and Western nations. And it says here to stoke tension, to fuel conflict, okay? East European Union, Western partners, okay? So this is true, okay? So if you just go to the paragraph, you'll see that the sentence highlighted with the number and letter after it, and you'll know that's the answer to where you can find this information, okay? Very quickly, in number 7, by China and Russia joining forces against democratic regimes, history is seemingly being upheld in the fact that more authoritarian regimes are likely to appear worldwide. Current shifts in geopolitical power are a second factor, increasing the potency of the threat that Russia and China pose to democracy. History shows that when the world is led by one or more authoritarian powers, more countries become authoritarian. So we can see that history seems to be upholding or defending the same fact that authoritarian regimes are likely to appear worldwide. Okay, so what the text says about history, what the answer says about history are the same. Russia's up-and-coming international economic influence and China's probable military threat to the Asian continent have bred newfound synergy in authoritarian regimes. Actually, I inverted that. So it talks about Russia foreign policy is confrontational and brazen. China is more risk-averse and strategic. So actually, the economic influence is China and the military threat is Russia. Okay? So it inverts the ideas of the countries and their roles. Therefore, it's false. Letter C, Russia's up-and-coming... That's weird. Oh, that's repeated. Oh, bummer. The question should have been... I'll read you the question from my file here. That's a typographical error here. Which one did I miss? Letter C. Okay, let me read you from here. I copied the wrong one. My fault. It says, you can come to me so you don't get, it says, Venezuela and Cambodia represent current examples of how China's and Russia's support, respectively, have shored up friendly dictatorships. This is false. The term respectively forces the reference to be in the same order. China with Cambodia, Russia with Venezuela. And what I've done in the text, or in the answer, is I put Venezuela and Cambodia, China and Russia, respectively. By putting respectively, what I'm saying is Venezuela and China, Cambodia and Russia. You see what I'm saying? It's exactly the opposite. It's Venezuela and Russia, Cambodia and China. So because of the word respectively, the combination is out of order, therefore it's incorrect. Wow. Yeah, that's a good one. I totally apologize because in the PowerPoint here, I just realized I'll change it. But I just realized that I repeated letter B. I don't know why. But anyway, so we'll move on here. But the letter C is also false because of the improper parallelism. Okay? Oh, there it is. There's letter C. Oh, I repeated a slide. Okay, I got it now. Let me just show you what happened here. Because I was seeing the same answer here twice, I'm thinking, why is the same answer here twice? Okay. I'm going crazy. The PowerPoint's right. My fault. Okay? Because you have the answer. No, okay. No. Okay, C is there. Yeah, I see the point now. Because what I did... Yeah, I gave the answer false and the text, but I didn't change the question. So what's wrong is the question there. Okay, but anyway, don't worry, it's false. All right, letter D is true. Russia and China need to act deliberately to foster autocracy, need not act, as their current images of growth and brazenness are swaying what people see as a justifiable government system. So they don't need to act on purpose to boost autocracy and weaken democracy. And that's exactly what the text says here below. So it is true. The last question is a vocabulary question here. Amplify when you look horizontally. Vertically, horizontally. No, I'm right, vertically. I always get those backed up. Oh, I hate it when that happens. Amplify when you look horizontally, up and down. Intensify and magnify mean the same thing. Diminish means to reduce. Mushroom means to expand in quantity. Amplify does not necessarily mean quantity. It just means expand, okay? Buttress means to bolster, to boost, almost to strengthen, to give more strength to strengthening, okay, but not sponsoring, which has the idea of giving money for. And linkages is the same thing as a link, a connection of some kind, a bond, a tie. But a yoke is what you use on an oxen. It's literally what you put on an oxen's head to hold them back. It's called a yoke, okay? So it's not the link between one thing and another. It's the connection between the driver and the ox so that he can hold the ox. So actually yoke is used more in the sense of limitation rather than connection, okay? So therefore, only letter C was correct in that option. All right. I went a little bit over time there, but I wanted to make sure I got through all the questions. I'm sorry about that letter C. Confused me, and I'm sure it very much confused you, but I will fix that in the PowerPoint. My fault. So there you have it. You can see how rich there are, how rich the texts are and how many texts there are about China and their influence. And they're combining a lot of texts with China and Russia because they see China and Russia as being the anti-capitalist powers, anti-democratic powers, okay? And they're the ones who are trying to undermine the democracy from the West in order to boost the authoritarian principles of the East, right? And with other economic, military, and geopolitical underpinnings as well. Okay, so these are great topics for you to be reading about, to be discussing with your colleagues, to be watching CNN and BBC. All right, and next time we will come back with China again, and we will talk about China and international economy. Then we'll focus a little bit more on the economic principle and a little bit less on domination militarily or sharp power, but more on how China plans to gain more economic dominance in the world. Okay, fair enough? That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.